Her small hands trembled as she grabbed his sleeve at the table. Mascara-stained tears carved lines down her flushed cheeks, each word fractured by panic. "They're beating my mama right now. Right now." The elegant room froze mid-breath. Friday night, present day. The Meridian Club, perched above the city's financial district. Wong S. Archie's sanctuary, where power brokers negotiate over Wagyu and vintage Bordeaux, where everyone knows the unspoken hierarchy. He sat at the center table, black suit tailored like armor, dark hair slicked back with precision. The tattoos visible at his collar and wrists told stories his expression refused to confirm. Ink that spoke of origins most men in this room had spent fortunes to distance themselves from. But Wong wore his past like a badge of authority, a reminder that he'd climbed from places they'd never survive. Around him, conversations flowed in carefully modulated tones. Senator Brennan discussed infrastructure appropriations 3 tables over. Claire Westbrook from Westbrook Capital laughed at something her companion said, but her eyes tracked Wong's movements. Marcus Chin signed documents between sips of scotch, his pen never hesitating because Wong had already approved the terms that afternoon. This was how Friday nights unfolded at the Meridian Club. Deals closed between appetizer and entree. Alliances shifted with dessert wine. Money changed hands through knotted agreements and carefully worded toasts. Wong orchestrated it all from his position at Table 7, the table everyone wanted but no one else could reserve. Maitre d' James knew without asking. Sparkling water, no ice. The Chateau Margaux breathing exactly 30 minutes before pouring. Seats filled only by invitation. His associate, David Park, sat to his right, tablet discreetly angled to show acquisition projections. To his left, empty, always empty. Wong preferred one side open, unobstructed. A habit from years of watching entrances, tracking exits, calculating angles. "The Harbor District property," David murmured. "Chin's people are asking 17 million. Offer 12. They'll accept 14 by Monday." Wong's voice carried the weight of certainty. He didn't predict outcomes. He arranged them. Feelings were vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities became weapons in others' hands. This was Wong's philosophy, refined over years of calculated moves and strategic distance. He'd learned it the hard way, the kind of education that leaves scars deeper than ink. Trust was currency he no longer traded in. Attachment was a liability he couldn't afford. The crystal chandeliers cast golden light across white tablecloths. Soft piano music drifted from the corner where Michael played Chopin with practiced elegance. Servers moved like ghosts in black vests, appearing precisely when needed, invisible when not. Everyone here understood the rules. Speak quietly. Never stare at Wong's table. If he acknowledged you, respond with appropriate deference. If he didn't, you didn't exist. It was a controlled environment. Sophisticated. Predictable. Then the doors burst open, and everything shattered. The mahogany doors exploded inward with a force that sent them crashing against the walls. The piano stopped mid-phrase. Every conversation died instantly. A child stood in the doorway, chest heaving, small frame silhouetted against the hallway's harsh fluorescent light. 6 years old, maybe 7. Blonde hair that had once been carefully brushed now hung in wild tangles around her face. Her light blue dress, the kind worn for special occasions, with a delicate white sash at the waist, was torn at the hem, dirt smudged across the fabric. One white sock had slipped down to her ankle. The other was missing entirely. She looked like she had run through chaos itself. Maitre d' James moved toward her with diplomatic urgency, hands raised in placating gesture. "Miss, I'm afraid this is a private." But Judith S. Klein wasn't looking at him. Her eyes scanned the room with terrible purpose, moving past Senator Brennan, past Claire Westbrook's shocked expression, past the frozen servers and the suspended wine glasses. Her gaze locked onto Table 7, onto Wong S. Archie. She moved, not the tentative shuffle of a lost child, but a desperate sprint. Her small feet pounded against Italian marble as she wove between tables. A server jerked backward, nearly dropping his tray. Marcus Chin pushed his chair away instinctively, paper scattering. "Security," James started to call out. Judith reached Wong's table and grabbed his sleeve with both hands. Her fingers clutched the expensive fabric with surprising strength, knuckles white from gripping. Up close, Wong could see the mascara-stained tears. Someone had tried to make her look pretty tonight, had carefully applied a touch of color to her young face for whatever occasion that blue dress represented. Now it ran in dark rivulets down her flushed cheeks. Please. The word came out broken, desperate. They're beating my mama right now. Right now. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her entire body shook. I saw the blood on the floor. So much blood. She told me to run and I ran, but she's still there and they won't stop, and the words tumbled over each other, coherence fracturing under panic's weight. Around them, the Meridian Club's carefully constructed atmosphere shattered like dropped crystal. Claire Westbrook pressed one hand to her chest, face pale. Senator Brennan half rose from his seat, then froze, uncertain. David Park's hand moved toward his phone, awaiting instruction. 2 security guards appeared at the entrance, unsure whether to advance. Every eye in the room turned toward table 7, toward Wong, waiting to see how the man who controlled everything would handle this intrusion of raw, messy humanity into his pristine sanctuary. Wong remained perfectly still. He looked down at the child whose desperation had pierced his carefully maintained world, at her small hands clutching his sleeve, at the terror in her eyes that held no calculation, no agenda, no manipulation, just pure, unguarded need. The kind of vulnerability he'd spent years teaching himself to ignore. The silence stretched. Seconds that felt like hours while everyone waited for Wong S. Archie to respond. His face remained unreadable. The same expression he wore during hostile negotiations, during threats delivered in back rooms, during moments when lesser men revealed their hands through microexpressions. Years of practice had taught him to show nothing. But something shifted behind his eyes. Something he'd buried so deep he'd almost convinced himself it no longer existed. 15 years earlier, different city, different life. Before the Meridian Club and tailored suits and tables that commanded rooms. Before he'd learned that power came from emotional distance and carefully constructed walls. Her name had been Sarah, his sister. 12 years old with eyes that lit up when she laughed, with dreams of becoming a teacher, with an annoying habit of stealing his jacket because she said it made her feel safe. She'd trusted people instinctively, believed in goodness reflexively, saw the world as a place where kindness mattered. Wong had been 19, working double shifts at the warehouse, trying to build something legitimate, trying to keep them both out of the life their father had drowned in. The call came on a Thursday. Sarah hadn't come home from school. Her friend Maya said she'd seen her talking to Uncle Chun. Not really their uncle, just one of father's old associates who'd promised to look out for the family. Wong found her 3 days later. Chun had borrowed money from the wrong people. Used it wrong. When they came collecting, Chun gave them Sarah as collateral. Just for a few days, he'd told her. Just until I sort things out. They'd kept her in a basement apartment in Koreatown. Done things that the police report documented in clinical language that couldn't capture the horror. When Chun couldn't pay, when his promises proved as empty as everything else about him, they'd simply left her there. Wong had trusted Chun, had believed his reassurances that Sarah would be safe if Wong kept working legitimate jobs, kept his head down, stayed away from the family business. That trust had killed her. He'd found Chun 2 weeks later. What happened in that warehouse was the last time Wong allowed himself to feel anything without calculation behind it. The last time rage controlled him instead of the other way around. After, he'd sought out the coldest, most calculating men in the city, learned from them, became harder than any of them. Feelings are what got her killed, his mentor Jean had told him. You loved her. Everyone knew it. That made her a target. That made her leverage. You want to survive in this world? You bury that capacity so deep no one can ever use it against you again. So Wong had. He'd buried grief, buried rage, buried the part of himself that loved fiercely and openly. He'd replaced it all with calculation, strategy, controlled power. He'd built walls so high and thick that nothing could penetrate them. Connection was a liability. Attachment was a weapon others would use. Trust was currency he no longer traded in. It had worked. He'd risen from that grief-shattered apartment to this center table. From powerless kid to the man everyone feared. The walls had protected him, kept him safe, made him untouchable. Until now. Until 6-year-old Judith Klein grabbed his sleeve with trembling hands and looked at him with the same desperate trust Sarah had shown Chun 15 years ago. Those walls began to crack. Wong's hand moved, slowly, deliberately, and covered Judith's small fingers still clutching his sleeve. Around the room, People exhaled breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. "What's your name?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but not cold. The child blinked up at him, tears still streaming. Judith. Judith Klein. Judith. He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. "Tell me what happened." The words tumbled out between gasps and sobs, her small body shaking with the effort of speaking. "Mama and me, we were at the apartment. She was making dinner. Spaghetti. My favorite." Her fingers tightened on his sleeve. Then they came. 3 men. They were yelling about money. About Mr. Castellano. Mama told me she didn't have it yet, that she needed more time, but they wouldn't listen. Wong's expression remained unreadable, but David Park noticed his boss's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Mama works 2 jobs, Judith continued, the words spilling faster now. "She cleans offices at night, and she waitresses during the day at the diner on 5th Street. She's so tired all the time, but she always makes me breakfast and helps with my homework in." Her voice cracked. "She borrowed money for my medicine last year. When I got sick, the hospital bills were so much and Mr. Castellano said he'd help, that the interest was fair, but it kept growing and Mama couldn't." "The men," Wong interrupted gently. "What did they look like?" "One was tall, really tall with a shaved head and a scar here." She traced a line down her own cheek with trembling fingers. He grabbed Mama's arm and twisted it, and she screamed. Another one had a tattoo on his neck, like a snake, and he kept saying Castellano doesn't wait over and over. Judith's breathing became more ragged. The third one just watched. He was smoking and smiling like it was funny. Like hurting Mama was funny. "Mama shoved me toward the door," she whispered. "Told me to run. To find help. But before I got out, I saw." Her whole body trembled. "There's so much blood on the floor." The tall one hit her with something, and she fell, and there was blood coming from her head, and she wasn't moving right, and they were still hitting her, and the words dissolved into sobs. Wong listened. To anyone watching, his face showed nothing, the same controlled mask he wore during business dealings. But David had worked for Wong long enough to recognize the microscopic shifts. The way his boss's breathing had changed, becoming deeper, more deliberate. The slight tension in his shoulders. The way his free hand had curled into a fist against the white tablecloth before deliberately relaxing. Senator Brennan shifted uncomfortably 3 tables away. Claire Westbrook pressed a napkin to her mouth, her own eyes glistening. "Mr. Castellano," Wong said quietly. "Victor Castellano?" Judith nodded miserably. Everyone in the room knew that name. Small-time loan shark operating in the industrial district. Not sophisticated enough for the Meridian Club, but predatory enough to trap people like Judith's mother, desperate people with nowhere else to turn. Wong had never done business with Castellano. Had, in fact, refused several requests for meetings. The man ran his operation with unnecessary cruelty, targeting the vulnerable instead of those who understood the game. "Where?" Wong's voice remained calm. "Where is your apartment?" "Maple Street, Building 437, 3rd floor." The address came out automatically, practiced from filling out school forms. Wong's hand remained covering hers. "How long ago did you leave?" I don't know. I ran as fast as I could. I remembered seeing this place once with Mama. She pointed at it and said important people eat here, and I thought," her voice broke again, "I thought maybe someone important could help." Around them, the Meridian Club remained frozen. Dessert wine sat untouched. The piano stayed silent. Every eye focused on table 7, where the most feared man in the room sat holding a terrified child's hand. Wong looked into Judith's desperate eyes and saw Sarah. Saw every person he'd failed to protect because protection required something he'd sworn never to feel again. His walls didn't just crack. They shattered. Logic warred with something deeper in Wong's chest. Something he'd thought dead and buried 15 years ago. The logical move was clear. Hand the child to security, make a phone call, have someone else handle it. Stay removed. Stay clean. Stay protected behind the walls that had kept him safe. This wasn't his problem. Wasn't his responsibility. Getting involved meant exposure. Meant showing that he could be moved by something as simple as a child's tears. Meant revealing the vulnerability he'd spent years concealing. Connection was a liability. Attachment was a weapon others would use. But Judith's hand still gripped his sleeve. Her desperate eyes still held that terrible trust. The same trust Sarah had shown Chin moments before everything went wrong. The same trust Wong had failed to protect. He'd told himself for 15 years that emotional distance made him strong. That calculated detachment kept him powerful. That caring about nothing meant nothing could hurt him. But sitting in his sanctuary, looking at this 6-year-old child whose world was shattering in real time, Wong understood something fundamental. He'd survived, but he hadn't lived. He'd built an empire on emotional emptiness, and it had hollowed him out from the inside. The realization moved through him like earthquake tremors, small fractures becoming fissures, fissures becoming chasms. He could send someone else, could make calls from a distance, could help without involvement. Or he could choose differently, could choose to be the person he'd needed 15 years ago, could choose protection over detachment, could choose to care about the cost. Wong's decision crystallized in an instant. Get the car. His voice cut through the silence with absolute authority. David Park moved immediately, phone already in hand. Around the room, people startled at the sudden shift in energy. Called Dr. Reeves. Wong continued, his tone precise and commanding. Tell her I need her at 437, Maple Street, 3rd floor, trauma response. Now. He paused. And locate Victor Castellano. I want to know where he is within the next 30 minutes. On it, David's fingers flew across his screen. Wong rose from his chair, the movement fluid, controlled, and crouched down until he was at Judith's eye level. His expensive suit touched the marble floor. His tattooed hands, capable of such calculated violence, reached out with unexpected gentleness. Judith. He waited until her tear-filled eyes focused on his face. Look at me. She did. Your mother will be safe. Each word carried absolute certainty. I promise you this. Wong S. Archie never made promises lightly. In 15 years of building his empire, he'd learned that promises were contracts written in blood. That your word either meant everything or nothing. He'd never broken a promise. Not once. We're going to get her help right now, he continued, his voice steady and calm. The best doctor I know is already on her way. But I need you to be brave a little longer. Can you do that? Judith nodded, her small body still trembling, but something shifting in her expression, terror mixing with fragile hope. Wong extended his hand, not the casual gesture of an adult humoring a child, but the formal extension of partnership, of respect. Come with me. Her small hand slipped into his larger one. Around them, the Meridian Club watched in stunned silence. Senator Brennan sat frozen, wine glass suspended midair. Claire Westbrook's mouth hung slightly open. Marcus Chun had stopped even pretending to look at his documents. They were witnessing something unprecedented. Wong S. Archie choosing vulnerability, choosing involvement, choosing to care publicly about something beyond calculation and power. David appeared at his elbow. Car's ready. Dr. Reeves is en route. I have 4 of our people tracking Castellano's locations. Wong nodded once, then turned toward the exit, Judith's hand firmly in his. James the maitre d' stepped back instinctively, doors already opening. As they passed through, Wong felt the weight of every eye in the room, felt his carefully constructed reputation shifting, felt the whispers that would spread before morning about the night Wong S. Archie walked out of the Meridian Club holding a child's hand. He didn't care. For the first time in 15 years, something mattered more than his walls. The Mercedes E-Class tore through city streets, David at the wheel navigating with controlled precision. Traffic laws became suggestions as they cut through intersections, headlights blurring into streaks of white and red. Wong sat in the back seat with Judith. Her small hand gripped his with desperate strength, her body pressed against the leather interior as quiet sobs shook her shoulders. He didn't tell her to stop crying, didn't tell her everything would be fine. Empty reassurances were lies, and he wouldn't lie to her. Instead, his thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, a gesture he didn't consciously choose, but his body remembered from another lifetime, from comforting Sarah after nightmares. 7 minutes out, David called from the front. Wong's phone buzzed. Dr. Reeves, en route. ETA 8 minutes. Bringing full trauma kit. The streetlights of the financial district gave way to the dimmer bulbs of the industrial quarter. Buildings grew shorter, grimier. Maple Street appeared, a row of aging apartment complexes with cracked facades and flickering porch lights. David pulled to a sharp stop in front of 437. The building's entrance door hung partially open, one hinge broken. Wong was moving before the car fully stopped, Judith's hand still in his. David fell in behind them, his other hand inside his jacket where Wong knew he kept a Glock 19. The stairwell smelled of mildew and old cigarette smoke. Graffiti covered the walls. A fluorescent light buzzed intermittently on the second-floor landing. Third floor. Apartment 3C. The door stood ajar, splintered wood around the lock indicating forced entry. "Stay behind me," Wong told Judith quietly. For once, she obeyed without question. He pushed the door open with his foot. The apartment told its story in destruction. Overturned chairs. Shattered plates. The spaghetti dinner spread across linoleum in a grotesque still life. A small table lamp lay broken against the wall. And blood. Dark pools spreading across the kitchen floor. Judith's mother lay crumpled near the counter, one arm bent at an unnatural angle, blood matting her dark hair. Her face was swollen, already bruising. Her breathing came in shallow, ragged gasps. But she was breathing. "Mama!" Judith's scream pierced the apartment. Wong knelt beside the woman, fingers moving to her neck to check her pulse. Steady but weak. He assessed the injuries with practiced efficiency. Head trauma, possible concussion, broken arm, extensive bruising. Serious, but survivable with immediate care. "Mrs. Klein." His voice was firm, but not harsh. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. A small groan escaped her lips. "Judith is safe," he continued. "You're going to be okay. Medical help is coming." Behind him, Judith had frozen in the doorway, her small body rigid with trauma, eyes locked on her mother's bloodied form. The reality of what she'd witnessed, what she'd fled, crashed over her all at once. Her breathing came in quick, panicked gasps. Wong glanced at David. "Get blankets. Keep her warm. Check for other injuries." David moved immediately, finding a throw from the couch, carefully positioning it over Mrs. Klein's body without disturbing her injuries. Wong crossed to Judith and crouched down, gently turning her face away from the scene. "Look at me, Judith. Not there. Here." Her eyes met his, wild with fear. "You did exactly right," he said quietly. "You ran. You found help. Your mama is alive because of you. Do you understand?" She nodded shakily. "Dr. Reeves will be here in 3 minutes. Your mother is strong. She's going to make it." Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Dr. Reeves burst through the door, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair, already snapping on latex gloves, trauma kit in hand. She assessed the scene in seconds. "Get the child out. Now." Wong guided Judith to the hallway as Dr. Reeves began her work, barking instructions to David about supplies and positioning. His phone vibrated. He answered on the first ring. "We've located them." His associate Marcus's voice was calm, efficient. "Castellano's at his usual spot, warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. All 3 men are with him. Do you want us to move?" Wong looked down at Judith, who was staring at the apartment door, listening to her mother's groans and the doctor's rapid-fire medical jargon. "No." His voice carried absolute authority. "Don't touch them. I'm handling this personally." He ended the call. Some deaths required personal collection. The ambulance screamed through dark streets, sirens cutting through the night air. Dr. Reeves worked over Mrs. Klein with steady hands, monitoring vitals, stabilizing the head injury, adjusting for flow. Wong's Mercedes followed close behind, David navigating with the same controlled precision. In the back seat, Judith sat pressed against Wong's side, her small hand still gripping his like a lifeline. She hadn't let go since the apartment. Hadn't spoken either, just stared ahead with shock-glazed eyes. St. Catherine's Medical Center appeared. A modern glass structure in the hospital district where Wong's donations ensured certain privileges. The ambulance pulled directly to the private emergency entrance, bypassing the crowded public bay. Dr. Reeves had called ahead. A full trauma team waited. 2 surgeons, an anesthesiologist, 3 nurses. They moved with choreographed efficiency, transferring Mrs. Klein to a gurney, rapid-fire assessment of injuries, wheel her toward imaging. Judith tried to follow. "Mama," a nurse, young, well-meaning, stepped in her path. "Sweetie, you can't go back there. You need to wait. She stays with me." Wong's voice carried quiet authority that made the nurse step back instinctively. He addressed Dr. Reeves directly. "Private recovery room. Around-the-clock care. Whatever she needs. Already arranged." Dr. Reeves met his eyes with understanding. She'd treated enough of Wong's associates over the years to know how his operations worked. Head CT, then surgery for the arm. "I'm calling in Chun for the orthopedic work. He's the best." We'll have a full assessment within the hour. The medical team disappeared through double doors, leaving Wong and Judith in the sterile quiet of the private waiting area. David appeared with coffee Wong didn't ask for, and a hot chocolate for Judith she didn't touch. Building security is briefed. No one gets to this floor without clearance. I've stationed 2 of our people at the elevators. Wong nodded once. Standard protocol, but necessary. Castellano was small time, but cornered animals were unpredictable. What else? David asked quietly. Stay with them. No one approaches without my approval. Wong's tone left no room for interpretation. Judith tugged at his sleeve. You're leaving? He crouched to her level again. Only for a little while. David will stay right here. Your mother is in the best possible hands. But what if, her voice cracked. What if she doesn't? She will. He said it with absolute certainty. Not false hope, but promise. Dr. Reeves doesn't lose patience. And your mother is a fighter. You know that, don't you? Judith nodded slowly, tears tracking fresh lines down her face. When I come back, you can tell me she's awake. Can you do that for me? Another small nod. Wong straightened, but Judith's hand tightened on his sleeve. Where are you going? He could lie, could deflect, could tell her he had business to attend to. But he'd promised himself no lies. To make sure the men who hurt your mother never hurt anyone again. Understanding flickered in her young eyes. Not full comprehension. She was 6, but recognition that justice was coming. She released his sleeve. The waiting room had a small couch, worn but clean. Judith curled into it, her small body finally giving in to exhaustion. David draped a blanket over her, and within minutes, her breathing deepened into fitful sleep. Wong stood watching her for a long moment. This child who'd grabbed his sleeve and shattered his carefully constructed isolation. This child who'd trusted him with absolute faith despite his reputation, despite his appearance, despite every reason she had to fear men like him. She'd run through chaos itself to find help. Had chosen him instinctively. And something fundamental had shifted inside his chest. For 15 years, he'd operated as a detached strategist. People were assets or obstacles. Situations were problems to solve. Emotions were vulnerabilities to eliminate. But standing in this hospital waiting room, watching Judith sleep fitfully while her mother fought for stability down the hall, Wong felt something he'd thought permanently calcified. Protective instinct. Not the calculated protection he offered business associates. Not the strategic alliances that served mutual interests. This was different. Primal. The kind of fierce guardianship that didn't calculate costs or consider angles. The kind that said, these people are mine now, and I will burn down anyone who threatens them. Dr. Reeves emerged 2 hours later. She's stable. CT shows concussion, but no skull fracture. Arm required 3 pins, but Shun says full recovery expected. She'll wake up groggy from anesthesia, but she'll wake up. Wong exhaled slowly. When? Another hour, maybe 2. He glanced at Judith, still sleeping. At David, standing watch. At the sterile hallway leading to recovery rooms where Mrs. Klein would wake to a new reality. One where she and her daughter had a guardian she hadn't asked for, but desperately needed. Wong pulled out his phone and texted Marcus, on my way. Now to address those responsible. The warehouse on Industrial Boulevard sat dark and isolated, surrounded by chain-link fence and forgotten shipping containers. No cameras. No witnesses. The kind of place where business was conducted outside official channels. Marcus met Wong at the entrance, his expression professionally neutral. All 3 inside. Castellano showed up 20 minutes ago. They think we're here about territory. Let them think whatever they want. Wong's voice was flat, controlled. The interior stretched vast and empty. Concrete floors, exposed steel beams, a single office in the back corner where lights spilled through dirty windows. Wong's footsteps echoed as he crossed the space, Marcus falling into position behind him. 4 of his people stood outside the office door. Inside, voices argued in heated tones. Wong pushed the door open. The conversation died instantly. Victor Castellano sat behind a battered desk, mid-50s, receding hairline, expensive watch on his wrist that didn't match his cheap suit. The 3 men from the apartment stood around him like poorly trained guard dogs. The tall one with the shaved head and facial scar. The one with the snake tattoo coiling up his neck. The third who'd smiled while watching Mrs. Klein get beaten. Their earlier aggression had evaporated. Now they shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between Wong and the door. calculating odds they didn't like. Castellano recovered first, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Archie, this is unexpected. If this is about the Henderson territory, I can assure you. Judith Klein. Wong's voice cut through the explanation like a blade. 6 years old. Blonde hair. Light blue dress. The color drained from Castellano's face. She came to the Meridian Club tonight. Wong continued, each word measured and devastating. Interrupted my dinner. Do you know what she said? Silence. She said 3 men were beating her mother. That there was blood on the floor. That her mother told her to run. Wong's gaze moved to each of the 3 men in turn. She was terrified. Crying so hard she could barely breathe. The tall one spoke up, voice shaking slightly. Look, it was just business. The woman owed. Do I look like I'm asking you to speak? The man's mouth snapped shut. Wong stepped further into the room. Despite being outnumbered, despite the confined space, his presence dominated completely. Mrs. Klein borrowed money for her daughter's medical bills. You charged interest that ensured she'd never pay it off. Then you sent these 3 to collect knowing she had nothing. It's how the business works, Castellano tried. You of all people understand. I understand that you prey on desperate people. That you target single mothers and desperate families because they can't fight back. Wong's tone remained eerily calm. I understand that you sent 3 grown men to beat a woman in front of her 6-year-old daughter. He reached into his jacket pocket. The 3 enforcers tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Wong pulled out a strip of torn fabric, light blue with a white sash, stained with dirt from Judith's desperate run through the city. The hair ribbon from her dress. He'd found it in his car, fallen from where she'd gripped his hand so tightly. This, Wong said quietly, belonged to a child who trusted me to make things right, who believed that someone with power would choose to protect her instead of preying on her. He set the ribbon on Castellano's desk with deliberate care. So now we're going to discuss what happens next. Castellano's forced confidence cracked. Listen, we can make this right. I'll forgive the debt. Leave them alone. You'll do more than that. Wong's voice carried absolute authority. You're going to liquidate your operation. Every outstanding debt you hold, forgiven. Every contract, null. You have 72 hours. That's everything I've built. I don't care. The snake tattoo enforcer shifted nervously. We were just following orders. Wong's gaze pinned him. You smiled. While beating a woman in front of her daughter, you smiled. The man's face went white. Wong faced an internal choice in that moment. The old Wong. The one who'd spent 15 years building walls and eliminating threats with calculated brutality, whispered that examples needed to be made. That mercy was weakness. That these men deserved everything his reputation promised. But Judith's desperate eyes haunted him, her small hand in his. Her trust that he would make things right, not just vengeful. Justice or revenge. Protection or destruction. Here's what's going to happen, Wong said finally. Mrs. Klein and her daughter receive full restitution, medical expenses, lost wages, compensation for trauma. From your personal accounts, Castellano. That's not negotiable. Wong's tone made it clear this wasn't a discussion. Additionally, you 3, he gestured to the enforcers, will find new employment. Far from this city. I have associates in Seattle who need warehouse workers. Legitimate warehouse workers. Minimum wage. No violence. No collections. You'll take those positions, or you'll discover what happens when you decline my generosity. The tall one swallowed hard. And if we refuse? Wong let the silence answer. As for you, Castellano, you're done in this city. This ends now, and it never happens again. Not to Mrs. Klein. Not to anyone. Because if I hear your name again, if I hear about anyone following your model. He leaned forward slightly. Judith Klein trusted me to protect her. I will not disappoint that child. The threat hung unspoken, but crystal clear. Marcus stepped forward, paperwork already prepared. Sign these. Debt forgiveness. Restitution agreement. Transfer documents. Castellano's hand shook as he signed. Wong pocketed the hair ribbon and turned toward the door. Behind him, he heard Castellano's weak voice. That's it? You're just letting us go? Wong paused. I'm choosing to be the person a 6-year-old believed I was. Don't make me regret that choice. He walked out into the night, feeling something shift in his chest. Not satisfaction. Not the cold completion of a transaction. Something warmer. More human. The beginning of redemption. 2 months later. Sunday afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows of the renovated apartment on Riverside Drive, a neighborhood where children played and maintained parks and security cameras actually worked. Where Mrs. Klein no longer flinched at unexpected knocks on the door. Wong sat at the small dining table, his tailored suit jacket draped over the chair back, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Across from him, Judith carefully colored a drawing with fierce concentration, tongue poking slightly from the corner of her mouth. "This one's you," she announced, holding up the paper. Wong studied the crayon figure. Dark hair, dark suit, surrounded by what appeared to be stars or possibly flowers. Her artistic intent remained ambiguous. "The yellow bits are because you're important," Judith explained seriously. "Important people have yellow around them. Is that so?" A slight smile tugged at his lips, an expression that would have shocked anyone from the Meridian Club. Mrs. Klein emerged from the kitchen carrying a pot of tea, her movements still slightly careful around the arm that had required 3 pins. The bruises had faded weeks ago, replaced by the healthier complexion of someone sleeping through the night again. "Judith, don't bother Mr. Archie with. She's not bothering me." Wong accepted the drawing, folding it with unexpected care and tucking it into his jacket pocket. "Thank you, Judith." The child beamed. Mrs. Klein poured tea, a ritual established over the past 8 weeks. Every Sunday, Wong arrived at 2 o'clock. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. But he was present, consistent, a guardian presence that asked nothing in return. "The job is going well," Mrs. Klein offered quietly. "Mr. Chin says I'm a natural with the accounts receivable system." Wong had arranged the position, legitimate work, decent pay, reasonable hours. Marcus Chin's shipping company needed administrative help, and Mrs. Klein needed stability. Simple equation. And Judith's school? She loves it. Made 3 new friends last week. Mrs. Klein's voice carried wonder, as if normalcy was still surprising. Her teacher says she's reading above grade level. Private school in a safe neighborhood. Tuition handled through an anonymous scholarship fund that bore no connection to Wong S. Archie on paper, but everyone involved understood perfectly. Protection took on new meaning now. Not the calculated safeguarding of business assets or the strategic positioning of useful allies. This was different, personal, invested, the kind of guardianship that didn't calculate returns. Wong had spent 15 years wielding power to control, dominate, extract. Now he was learning to wield it differently. To protect, to nurture, to create space where innocence could recover and thrive. His phone buzzed. "David, Brennan meeting moved to 7 p.m. Do you need the files?" He typed back. "Handle it. I'm occupied." 6 months ago, that response would have been unthinkable. Wong attended every meeting, controlled every detail, maintained presence as proof of authority. Now, Sunday afternoons belonged to Judith and her mother. The city's power brokers could wait. "Can we show him?" Judith bounced excitedly, looking at her mother. Mrs. Klein smiled, genuine, reaching her eyes. "Go ahead." Judith ran to her room and returned clutching a small photo album, the kind with plastic sleeves and colorful borders. She climbed into the chair next to Wong and opened it carefully. School pictures. A birthday party Wong had arranged at a place with excessive balloons. Judith and her mother at the park. Several photos of Wong himself. Caught unaware during his visits, looking softer than he ever appeared at the Meridian Club. "This is my family book," Judith explained. "Mama says family is people who show up and stay." Wong felt something tighten in his chest. That definition of family, so simple, so profound, contradicted everything his world taught. Family was blood. Loyalty was purchased. Connection was contract. But here sat a 6-year-old teaching him a different truth. "May I?" He gestured to the album. Judith nodded, pushing it toward him. He turned pages slowly, studying evidence of 2 months that had transformed more than just the Klein family's circumstances. Each photo captured moments he'd been present for, but hadn't fully recognized. Shared meals, helped homework, established routine. The evidence of chosen family. At the Meridian Club, whispers had spread about Wong's transformation. Some called it weakness. Others called it a power play no one understood yet. David knew better. "You're different with them," David had observed last week during a car ride. "How so?" "You smile. Real smiles, not the calculated ones you give Senator Brennan." Wong hadn't argued because David was right. The man who'd spent 15 years believing feelings were vulnerabilities had discovered something unexpected. Caring didn't make him weak. It made him human. And being human, truly, messily human, held its own kind of strength. Judith leaned against his arm, pointing at a photo. "That's when you taught me chess. I'm getting better." "You are," he agreed. Mrs. Klein watched them with quiet gratitude she didn't voice because Wong had made it clear he wanted no thanks. This wasn't charity. This wasn't obligation. This was what happened when someone chose connection over isolation. When the guardian became the guarded, and the rescued became the rescuer. 3 months after that Friday night at the Meridian Club, the city still whispered. In boardrooms and back offices, over expensive dinners and private phone calls, people discussed the night Wong S. Archie walked out holding a child's hand. Some called it calculated, a long-game strategy no one had decoded yet. Others called it weakness, waiting for rivals to exploit the opening. David knew they were all wrong. He'd watched his boss transform from the inside out. Watched the man who'd spent 15 years building impenetrable walls slowly dismantle them brick by brick. Not because of strategic advantage or calculated positioning, but because a 6-year-old girl had grabbed his sleeve and trusted him with absolute faith. The Klein situation changed him, Marcus observed during a quarterly review, keeping his voice neutral and professional. "Yes," David agreed simply. They didn't need to elaborate. Everyone in Wong's inner circle saw it. The way he'd shifted priorities, carved out time that used to be filled with endless meetings, established boundaries around Sunday afternoons that were previously unthinkable. The way he smiled now, real smiles that reached his eyes. But the truth ran deeper than anyone except Wong himself understood. Judith hadn't found a protector that desperate night. She had freed him from his own prison. For 15 years, Wong had believed emotional isolation kept him safe. That walls protected against loss, against betrayal, against the kind of pain that had shattered him when Sarah died. He'd convinced himself that power came from detachment, that strength meant caring about nothing deeply enough to be hurt. He'd survived, built an empire, commanded respect and fear in equal measure. But he'd been alone. Profoundly, devastatingly alone. Judith had shattered that isolation simply by trusting him. By looking at the most dangerous man in the room and believing he would choose compassion over cruelty, protection over power. She'd given him permission to be human again. Even the most guarded hearts could choose connection over isolation, could choose to care despite the risk, could choose family not defined by blood but by presence, by showing up, by staying. Thursday evening, Wong sat in a tiny elementary school auditorium, surrounded by proud parents holding phones and cameras. The folding chair was uncomfortable. The acoustics were terrible. A child somewhere behind him kept kicking his seat. He'd never been happier. On stage, 23 first graders performed a play about community helpers, firefighters, teachers, doctors, police officers. Judith stood near the center in a homemade nurse costume, reciting her lines with careful precision. When she spotted Wong in the third row, her face lit up with pure joy. She waved. A quick, excited gesture that broke character completely and earned gentle laughter from the audience. Wong waved back. Mrs. Klein sat beside him, tears glistening in her eyes. Not from sadness anymore, but from overwhelming gratitude for the normalcy they'd been given. For safety, for second chances, for the unexpected guardian who'd transformed their lives by letting them transform his. After the performance, Judith ran to them, costume slightly askew, beaming with pride. "Did you see me? Did you see my part?" "Every second," Wong confirmed, crouching down to her level, a gesture that had become natural over 3 months. "You were perfect." She threw her arms around his neck in an unself-conscious hug that would have been unthinkable 15 years ago, impossible 3 months ago, but felt completely right now. Over her small shoulder, Wong caught his reflection in the auditorium's glass doors. Same tailored suit, same careful appearance, but different eyes. Less guarded. More present. More alive. Sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. A 6-year-old girl had taught him what 15 years of calculated power never could. That vulnerability wasn't weakness. That caring wasn't liability. That the strongest walls were the ones you chose to lower for people who mattered. That protection worked both ways. The guardian protecting the innocent, yes, but also the innocent protecting the guardian from his own isolation. Wong S. Archie had spent years believing feelings were vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities were weapons. He'd been wrong. Feelings were what made life worth protecting. Vulnerability was what made connection possible. And the greatest weapon against the darkness wasn't isolation. It was choosing to care anyway. Sometimes redemption comes not from grand gestures, but from small hands grabbing your sleeve and trusting you to be better than your reputation suggests. Sometimes transformation happens because someone believes in who you could become, not who you've been. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales of unlikely connections and the power of choosing compassion over fear. Because every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And sometimes, showing up is the most revolutionary act of all.